James Mullen. I'm running for Secretary of State. I come out of Deer Lodge, and my background is initially as a journalist. I spent most of my career working at community newspapers, reporting on small city, county government. One of my first editor jobs was as the editor of the Phillipsburg Mail, and that's over in Granite County. So I do have quite a bit of experience interacting directly with the elections mechanism on a city and county level. And also thank you, it's nice to meet, we haven't met before today, and Eric, we've seen each other at a number of events, so it's good to see you again too. When it comes to election integrity in the state of Montana, we have completely safe and secure elections. Montana's elections are some of the safest in the country, and by extension, some of the safest in the world. When you go to vote, you can rest assured that your vote will be counted and that it will be tallied accurately and in a timely manner. And in large part, that's because most of the work of our elections is done by our county clerk and recorders and their election staff. The vast majority of the security mechanism that maintains that integrity within our state takes place here in your county. We have 56 counties, various clerk and recorders and elections deputies and judges who take their vows extremely seriously. And they're working with equipment that is vetted and approved by the legislature, and they work with the Secretary of State. We do not have the voter problems that you've seen in other areas. And a lot of the complaints that we hear coming out of some groups, particularly in Ravalli County, are false, they're misinformation. And if you speak to some of the legislators who have participated in this process over in Helena, I think they will say much the same thing. They've gone through a number of processes, even in this latest session, to ensure that we have safe and secure elections and that the equipment we're using isn't corruptible, and that the processes that are being employed by your clerk and recorders ensure that there is no opportunity for foul intent or ill will to get in there and change votes. So again, you're a voter here in this state. You don't have to worry about it too much. Really, the biggest concern to having your vote counted today is making sure that you are maintained on the voter rolls and issues with the United States Postal Service. Because most Montanans at this point do vote by mail, absentee ballot, and we are seeing a massive degradation in the quality of mail service in the state. I have a newspaper background. To mail a newspaper from Deer Lodge, which is in Powell County, to Ovando, which is in Powell County, can take 2 weeks. That's not hyperbole, that's not exaggeration. It can take 2 weeks for a newspaper to get from one side of the county to the other side of the county. And that's because we've seen a huge disinvestment in the local postal system. That's not something the Secretary of State can do much about. As a side note, I would urge everyone, if you value your mail service, Senator Daines and Senator Tester are amazing advocates for the USPS. And if enough of us call Zinke and Rosendale, maybe they will become too. But I've gone to DC a number of times to speak with Daines and Tester, and they are on our side. They understand the importance of rural mail delivery and how that impacts the election system. So, election integrity and its role with the Secretary of State's office. And again, most of this is done at the county level, but what happens in Helena to ensure that we have safe elections? Well, the information gathering, the training of your election judges. A lot of that's gathered at the state level. And I'll echo your call for volunteers. My wife was an elections judge until I decided to run for office. She can't do that now. If you are here, I assume you care pretty deeply about your community, and you might be involved with service organizations, and you know how difficult it is to recruit volunteers today. The elections offices need volunteers. If you want them to continue to be safe, if you want the results in a timely manner, we need people in our community to go volunteer to do that work. And it does take a fair amount of time to get the training, but it is one of the most rewarding things that you can do. So getting back to the Secretary of State's portion and the training of election judges. Currently, the training materials that are used for election judges in the state of Montana are about a decade out of date. They were created by Missoula County, and because of the way the legislature works and how the laws change in our state, the video is pretty out of date. And it's not an exaggeration to say, when you are going through that training, there might be instances where they have to pause and tell you, ignore this because it's no longer legal. We have to have current, up-to-date training information for our elections judges. I understand that they are going through a new process, I think again with Missoula County, to create new training materials. We want to make sure that they don't wait 10 years between the next update again. Information provided to the public, that's another function of the Secretary of State's office. Your counties can do that, but your counties are operating with extremely limited budgets. The Secretary of State does have a marketing budget. They do get to talk to the radio stations, the newspapers, the TV stations about how elections take place, and when a new law is passed, or if it hasn't been overturned by the courts at some point, they're the ones that are going to be putting that information out to the media to ensure that people are aware. This got a former and another Secretary of State in trouble because when something was passed by the legislature, they created a media campaign. This was directly related to same-day registration, voter registration on election day. And they had a large media campaign going out across the state. Then very shortly before the election, the law was declared unconstitutional, and they didn't have the opportunity to stop running those ads. Now, whether or not they really had that opportunity, that's up for you to decide. But that is something that creates misinformation within the community and confusion, and it does undermine the public's confidence in our elections. And the Secretary of State, when we're talking about voter integrity, because a lot of that work is done at the county level, what we want to see from the Secretary of State's office is that building of confidence. Having the back of your county clerk and recorders, making sure that they are adequately trained, the judges are adequately trained, and that the information coming out of the Secretary of State's office matches what's actually happening on the ground. That information that is shared with the public can often become political, and that shouldn't be the case. What you said earlier, that this is an office that really, it frustrates me that this is a partisan office. It really shouldn't be. And at the county level, it's often a partisan office. Maintaining the accuracy and validity of our elections, running the business services office, I don't think any of that changes much based on whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Independent. What matters is that you're performing a duty. This is sort of a COO role. It's an operational role. They are a record keeper for the state. The ability to become political is relatively minor unless you are actively trying to become political. We have to treat the Secretary of State's office like it is a functional role, and they have a job to do, and that they do the job and kind of stay out of politics altogether. So you spoke earlier about, you had a resignation locally of an elections
just last
official.
week.
Yeah. Because I have a background in journalism, one of the issues that motivated me to get involved in politics, because I've only been a Democrat for about 2 years now. I was an independent most of my career. I attended in 2020 a county meeting in Powell County where they were talking about switching to an all mail-in ballot because, it was the COVID year, nobody knew what was going on, and some county clerk and recorders thought that was the safest thing to do. When I attended that meeting on behalf of the newspaper as a journalist, there were a number of people in Revolutionary War outfits. There were people there with Guy Fawkes masks on, and they were screaming at the county commissioners, and they were screaming at the clerk and recorder that it's rigged, our elections are unfair, and that is a result of misinformation being given out to the public, or really not being combated by our government organizations. We have to do more work as a state and even within our counties to ensure that the public understands we really truly do have safe elections. I did a video on election day this year where I went and interviewed Jody, our clerk and recorder over in Powell County, and I was bringing in my absentee ballot, and we went through the process of how she receives that ballot, how they ensure that it is not somebody else's, and what they need to go through after that point to avoid any potential for someone to come and change it or to lose it. And it's a fairly in-depth process. I thought I was going to go in there and make a quick 2-minute video. It turned into about a 15-minute video of her just standing there explaining every single step along the line to ensure that we have those safe and secure elections. So if any of you know your clerk and recorder personally, tell them thank you, because they are doing so much work behind the scenes that most of us aren't aware of. The other thing I was supposed to talk about today is what happened during the recent legislative session. And there was a committee put together to focus on really that misinformation. And I think some of the people that wanted to put that committee together went in there with the expectation that we do have corruption. And some of the legislators on that committee, I felt that way too. But after going through that committee's process, all of them really came out of it realizing how safe and secure our elections are, and that they put a few things in place to make them even safer. Some of the items that came out of that committee, and I'd say probably the primary one that most people, if you're not aware of it, that you should be, was introduced by Shane Mourgeot. He's a legislator from just down the road. And this was really, it came with bipartisan support. And it was a way to update the voter rolls and ensure that the absentee voter rolls are updated on a consistent, regular basis. Now, that is something coming from the legislature, being told to your local county government that they have to do this in order to make sure that the rolls are up to date. Most of your clerk and recorders, again, are already doing a lot of that. I mean, your county clerks, most of them probably have a subscription to your local newspaper, and they're going through every week to look at the obituaries to clean up those rolls. If they are in a community this size, they're finding out if people move, and they're going in and cleaning up those rolls. Well, this is kind of an extra layer on top of that to ensure that if somebody is being lazy with their job, that there is really a mandate from the state, and it is in state law now, that they have to do this, and that it focuses on absentee ballots specifically because more and more of the population, we're a state that's growing older, there are more and more snowbirds, and there are a lot of absentee ballots going out. So they are spending more time checking those ballots to make sure people are voting here. Another thing that came out that's being challenged in court was making it a felony for somebody to purposely vote in 2 states. That's something that already was illegal. There's a bit of a brouhaha about it right now because they feel like the courts, the group that is challenging it for political reasons. I don't necessarily know that it should have been challenged, but I do understand why. I don't believe it's political. And this is where we're going into opinion. It's my opinion that the reason it's a challenge is because it was poorly worded. It's not a very enforceable bill. They're talking about intent. Well, who decides intent? And how do you, as a local judge or an attorney that's prosecuting, or the Secretary of State's office that might be turning that prosecution over to the Attorney General's office, decide that that intent is there? My hope is actually that the courts overturn this and that the legislature in the 2025 session picks it back up again and essentially creates the same bill, but phrased in a way that leaves a little bit less room for personal interpretation. Another thing that came out of the session, and this election committee was bipartisan. Almost everything that came out of it came out with enormous bipartisan support. Things got a little bit messy when it transferred from the Senate to the House, but they were able to clean it up. And one of the things that there was confusion around was who would prosecute. First, is it prosecuted locally? Is it prosecuted by the AG's office? Is it done by the Commission of Political Practices? The compromise they found was that the Secretary of State's office will actually lead the investigation, and if they find something is wrong, they will turn it over to the Attorney General's office. That's another level of security being added by our legislature in the most recent session to protect our elections. And so our legislators are taking this very seriously. They understand that there is misinformation out there, and they are doing the work necessary to combat that misinformation and to put additional levels of security on top of it. One of the other things that came out of that committee that failed was a county retention of documents. This was an expectation, and I think this came from Teresa Manzella out of Ravalli County. And I don't know if any of you know Teresa. Teresa is kind of in the election denier crowd, and I don't want to get into a debate over whether or not that really happened, but Teresa put forward this bill that ultimately would have significantly increased the costs for the counties to maintain this information. And it would have resulted in the mandatory purchasing of certain types of machines, and those machines come with annual subscriptions. 17 counties in the state don't have these machines. These machines cost about $50,000 a piece, and you're looking at about $5,000 to $10,000 a year just to maintain them. This is something that was expected to be passed through the legislature without any means of funding for it. I've toured the state talking to, I've spoken with more than 20 of our clerk and recorders to this point. I hope to speak with all of them. They're a little bit more blunt about it. They call them unfunded mandates. I don't think that's completely true. Some of them do have funding, and some of them are completely reasonable within existing budgets. But this is one that saw a lot of pushback from the counties because it would have resulted in significant additional expenses to the county. In all, that would have been an additional burden of about $500,000 going out to a small group of counties that are relatively small in population, because Missoula County, Lewis and Clark, Gallatin, they already have all this equipment. It's Liberty County that doesn't have it. It's Granite County that doesn't have this information. And I don't want to say Sanders because I don't know if they have it or not, but based on the population over here, I would suspect they don't. And they have to find a way to pay for that. You know, that extra $50,000 plus $5,000 to $10,000 a year. And I know everybody thinks about taxes on a fairly consistent basis. Your county budget is limited. If something comes from the legislature, they have to have a way to pay for it. And more often than not, that means either sacrificing something and putting your budget over here, or it means raising taxes. If you're talking about Missoula, sure, fine. There's plenty of waste to be found over there. If you're talking about Liberty County, it's shoestring. They do not have the ability to rearrange $50,000. They don't have the ability to rearrange $500. They are on tight budgets. So that is a big part of the reason you saw so much pushback from the counties there. There is one that was addressing the types of tests that are performed that failed. Let's see, you have the vote tabulation machines, that hasn't gone through. Talk to your legislators about the accuracy of the voter rolls, the one that Shane put forward. I think that really was a success story because you saw both parties come together on it, and it'll make a big difference. I mean, they were doing a lot of that work anyhow, but this ensures that it is definitely going to be done. Let's see. So those are most of my talking points. I'd like to go a little bit into what happens actually at the county level. And I know we tried to have somebody from the county here.
We pretty much have summarized that over here. So I think that the steps of county integrity and election integrity, I think that people that could just could pick that up on the flyer that's here. I think that, yeah, there it is.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
you might want to pick it up as well. It's specific to Sanders County, but it could be applied to other ones.
Okay, cool. Again, please do pick up that information because they do quite a bit. And yeah, we'll be ready for questions later, I guess.
We'll do questions later. Okay, Frank.
Okay.